There are opportunities for countries as well. Just like industries have opportunities, countries themselves have interesting opportunities in the platform economy. The first and biggest opportunity is that as trade moves towards digital trade, and as more and more trade happens on platforms, countries that are not strategically located in physical trade flows can now start exerting greater control in the geopolitical arena. And that might particularly have interesting implications for Australia, which is fairly removed physically, but in a world where a lot of trade is going to happen on these platforms, Australia can have a platform strategy as well with respect to its trade flows. Today, what we're seeing is traditional supply chains are contracting because automation is improving in the West, and so we no longer have the same level of investment in production facilities in the East. And so traditional supply chains are moving back closer to where the consumer market is. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of small businesses getting onto global trade because of platforms like Amazon and Tencent and Alibaba. And as more and more small businesses get onto platforms, this is an opportunity for countries to create their own small business trade platform, enabling these small businesses to get onto a single platform and participate in global trade. It's also an opportunity for countries that have unique trade-related intellectual property, whether it's fintech, logistics tech, to license this intellectual property to other countries that do not have this kind of intellectual property yet. It might be emerging countries in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, in Africa. A lot of these countries which do not have the intellectual property internally, but would benefit from the platform that a country like Australia could create. And then set up a free data port over here that allows all of this data from different countries to come in here and be governed by the individual jurisdictions of these individual countries, but have Australia benefit from all of the machine learning that comes from all of this data. And this is something that is actually it's not science fiction, it's something that is the parts of which are being practiced in countries like the Netherlands, Singapore, Ireland, and Denmark, all of which have been trying to figure out a platform-based strategy for their country. So it's an important point in time where countries need to figure out what this means for their position in global trade. The second thing that's important is to think about what this means for society. We've started seeing this happen in China, where a platform-based reputation score is used to determine your access to public services. And this reputation score comes in from the platforms that are already big out there. How you behave on Alibaba determines what kind of services you get access to. And we've had some kind of reputation-based access in the past, in the sense that banks have always given us loans based on our credit worthiness. That's been a reputation-based access to a product. But with platforms, we're going to start seeing this happen on a much broader scale, and at some point, countries need to step in and start determining what this means and what is the best kind of reputation-based access model for their society. Because the problems that we're starting to see in China serve as an initial case study. When you start building a reputation model for all kinds of services, you start seeing a mechanic where the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, because you don't have access to reputation, you don't have access to services, and so you don't have any ability to improve your reputation either. Whereas you have reputation, you get more access to services, and you improve your reputation. So if this is not architected well, it could actually lead to much more unequal societies than what we have today. And this is something that countries need to think about in terms of what this means for their individual societies. And finally, the third thing that countries need to think about is how does this play up in terms of their internal labor and empowerment of workers. What we're seeing in the platform economy, and if I were to round this up, this is something that is most important about where we're headed. What we're seeing in the platform economy is that there are only two kinds of winners. Everybody else increasingly loses in the platform economy. The first set of winners are the platforms themselves, because they create the large infrastructures on which all market activity happens. So they benefit from the actions of everybody. And the second set of players are the niche producers, the teenager on YouTube who has a makeup channel with 17 million viewers, the host on Airbnb who owns a set of islands and leases them out on Airbnb and runs a whole business. They are the niche set of producers who differentiate themselves well on these platforms and keep benefiting from the rich becomes richer cycle that I talked about. The rest of the economy gets increasingly commodified. We talked about how Facebook and Google commodified the media companies. We're seeing very similar things happen with respect to the future of work when you think about companies like Uber or DoorDash mediating work for people who are doing extremely commodified work. A ride on Uber is highly commodified to the extent that as a consumer, you don't really care who provides you that ride, as opposed to what happens on certain other platforms which are based on more differentiated provisioning of services. And so when we think about these platforms that are increasingly enabling commodified markets for commodified work, this is a point where countries need to step in and try to figure out what this means for their labor pool internally. How can they upskill the commodified workers so that they start participating in a way that they can differentiate themselves on these platforms? Countries also need to understand that it is the nature of the platform economy to create a few winners and create a whole range of losers. And so they need to create the right checks and balances so that these extreme inequalities start getting balanced out. One great example of this is Scandinavia, where because of the social security, an Uber driver usually uses Uber as just one of the many sources of income, as opposed to the US, where an Uber driver relies entirely on Uber and hence end up getting into a more commodified and exploited scenario. So it's really important in this situation that countries think about what this means for them from a labor perspective.